Good evening. To support devolution of equitable, accessible, affordable and quality healthcare, the national government in 2015 embarked on an ambitious mission, equipping a total of 98 hospitals. That's 2 hospitals in each of the 47 counties and 4 national hospitals under the Managed Equipment Service Project. But the project has not been free from controversy. Over 63 billion shillings seemed like a good investment for the 47 counties who would burden the cost. But with questions arising over the impact of the medical equipment, we explore tonight the possibility of the MES project being a big mess. Welcome to The Big Story. My name is Jesse Rogers. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's get right into it. At this juncture, I'd like to bring in our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna, who is set to have a proper conversation, still touching on the MES project, with Moses Kajwang, who's a senator of Homa Bay County, but also happens to be the chairperson of the Senate Public Accounts and Investments Committee. Sophia Wanuna, good evening. What do you have for us?
Good evening, Jesse. Indeed, the Managed Equipment Services appears to be having its wheels falling off. It's not the first time it's making headlines, now making headlines because of the cancellation of one of the contracts. Remember, it's 63 billion shillings for the entire medical equipment project, but several contracts under that. And the one that was recently cancelled by the minister is touching on ICT. And so with regard to that, about 4.5 billion shillings, if I'm not wrong. But of course, other investigations are ongoing on the other aspects of the contracts because remember, there is a Senate ad hoc committee that is investigating the managed equipment services. Now, the controversy around this began in President Kenyatta's first term when, through his administration, decided to lease this medical equipment for county governments. And why it was such a big problem and an issue is because healthcare is actually devolved in Kenya. But the only governor who stood to be counted at the time, whilst others appeared to be whipped to sign on and be part of this program, was the former Bomet governor and a former chair of the Council of Governors, Isaac Ruto, who I believe you'll be speaking to a little bit later on the show. And I wonder if he feels vindicated now. But this evening, let's speak with Senator Moses Kajwang, Homa Bay Senator, but also chair of the Committee on Public Accounts and Investment in the Senate, because it's a committee that has also looked at this issue. This is a matter that has been investigated many times over, and perhaps for many Kenyans watching tonight is to ask, will they get to the bottom of it once and for all? And will those held, who will be found culpable be held to account is also the big question. Senator, thank you for making time for us this evening. Let's begin perhaps that there is an ad hoc committee investigating this matter. What does that say? How big of an issue is it that an entire team has been put aside, set up to investigate a program by government?
Thank you, Sophia. This matter came to the fore when governors raised issues around the transparency of the contracts, transparency of the MOUs, and the value for money for this particular project. My Committee on Public Accounts and Investments has seen the reports of the Auditor General, and the Auditor General has cited several counties where they were supposed to have received equipment. In some counties, the equipment have not been received. In some counties, equipment have been received, but they're still lying in boxes. In some counties, they seem not to have any documentary evidence that binds them with the national government or with the suppliers of this equipment. We realized that as a Public Accounts and Investments Committee, we were not going to be able to give it the kind of thorough attention and focus that it required. And this is the reason why the House resolved to set up a select committee to look into the matter. We also felt that the Health Committee was also seized of so many other challenges in the health sector in counties. So we agreed that Senator Fatuma Dulo would lead a team of eminent senators to look deeply into this matter. Yeah. You do recall that the Auditor General left office in the month of August last year. In fact, now we have a constitutional crisis because it's 6 months since the Auditor General left and that office has not been filled. We would have wished that the office of the Auditor General would carry a thorough forensic and value for money audit over this program. Unfortunately, that cannot be done in the absence of an Auditor General. And as Senate, we felt that we were not going to sit down and wait for locusts to die of old age. We decided to do something about it.
But Senator, speak to me. It's all good that now investigations are going on. Yes, one contract has been cancelled. But there's a saying that it doesn't go wrong, it starts wrong. So did Senate drop the ball at the very beginning, where it appeared government was, national government that is, was piling pressure on the county government to sign on to a program where they had not seen the contract? They were signing a memorandum of understanding. It started wrong, Senator, and Senate failed Kenyans to the extent that they allowed for it to start even in the first place.
As I say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The intention of this program was noble. And you've seen the President Big Four, part of it, healthcare, is a fundamental agenda. Healthcare and medical services was devolved to counties in the 4th schedule of the Constitution. The national government came up with an interesting and well-intentioned PPP model that would allow counties to get equipment that they would otherwise not have been able to afford if they were to buy on their own. We believed that this would bring around some synergies that would allow counties to get equipment cheaper, and that would allow support for this equipment to be cheaper. Unfortunately, what turned out was more of a disaster than the reality we had expected. I do recall also, when this project started, there was quite some friction between the Council of Governors and the Senate. And that was when, during the leadership of Governor Isaac Ruto. So it did not create a good environment for Senate to sit with the Council of Governors and to have uniformity of purpose to look at this thing from the same perspective and to be on the same page. Yes, I agree with you that this matter should not have been allowed to go into the second year. Because for us as Senate, we are responsible for the County Allocation of Revenue Act. And that is where the money is. In the first year of its inception, there was 96 million that was allocated equally to each and every county government, be it Tharaka Nithi, be it Kiambu, be it Kajiado. What the national government did was to take a one-size-fits-all to all the counties. I mean, it was as silly as trying to make the same kind of uniform for members of a choir. It will never work. Counties had unique needs and different needs. So yes, we ought to have picked it at that point in time. The Council of Governors, who are signatories to this MOU, ought to have gone beyond the politics. Because if you talk to Isaac, if you talk to Oparanya and a few of the governors who refused to sign, they will tell you that they later succumbed to the politics of the day, not to the economics of this program. But the Senate, in the last allocation of revenue, in that discussion, the national government had proposed to increase the allocation from the 96 million to 200 million. We said no. Eventually, the figure went down to 131 million. And we have said that in this budget policy statement, division of revenue and allocation of revenue, we must scrutinize and we must get the truth behind this project before we approve another 131 million or even 1 million allocated that project. And that's why we want this ad hoc committee led by Senator Fatuma Dulo to give us a report that will help us to agree whether to refuse to allocate another conditional grant of that amount, or to reduce it to a number, or to increase it. Some of the issues, because if you look at the years that have passed, this project is almost coming to its tail end. We are still not sure what's going to happen when the 7-year period lapses.
Because it's leased.
Because it's leased. Yeah. And when it's leased, at the end of the lease period, the person who's listed to you is expected to come and take the items from you. Now, if they are going to be purchased by the county governments, none of the governors is aware. And I have personally visited a few hospitals. I remember I visited hospitals in Samburu. We went to Kapedo. And when we went to the hospital in Kapedo, basic problems. The hospital does not have water. A lot of the equipment was still lying in boxes. We went to Kwale. It was a similar problem. We've gone around counties, and they're saying that what they have received is not what is on paper. So it's something that we believe that in the discussion on the allocation of revenue, we as Senate, we have a responsibility to save taxpayers billions of shillings. And Sophia, it's not small money. If you look at what was allocated to this project in the last financial year, the 132 million per county, it comes to 6 billion Kenya shillings. 6 billion Kenya shillings into a project that has been described as a most opaque and that has been described as a classical mess. we have a responsibility now as Senate and also as the Council of Governors, who are the users. They are the ones who now need to tell us that we as users, we were given this equipment, we are given this program, it is not benefiting us. Yeah. And Senate, as a defender of devolution, shall listen to the Council of Governors this time more than it shall listen to the national government.
Yeah. And one of the astonishing things about this entire deal is the gross inflation of prices. I was looking at some of the report that it had found, for instance, a patient trolley, and some of these things surely one would argue need not be leased. There were washing basins, baby cots, as well disposable kits being leased in this program. But an example of the patient trolley, market price, if the governors had gone out to buy for themselves, would have been 26,680 per unit. But under the managed equipment services, it was 1,447,630 shillings, 54 times the amount if the county governments had done it. How do you as leaders face Kenyans and explain how this is even happening in the first place?
Some of these are criminal actions if they are proven to be true. And that is why we, and I'll keep going back to the issue of the absence of an Auditor General, because there are certain issues, certain queries, forensic analysis that the Office of the Auditor General is best suited to do. We as Senate will undertake an inquiry, but will make recommendations for more competent bodies to do their bit. When it comes to even the pricing of the items that were part of this lease arrangement, we saw linen trolleys that were being put at extremely crazy prices. And this is not hearsay. Governor Oparanya, when he appeared before my committee, he told us that for a CT scan that was delivered to him, the price was almost twice what he bought a CT scan for, because he is also capable of doing his own procurement. So on the face of it, there seems to be some very criminal actions that have been put in here. The issue of linen trolleys and some of these items that people wonder why they ought to be leased, perhaps that I can use the explanation that was given by the ministry. That part of the deliverables in this project, there were about 7 lots. Even though 2 lots, nobody knows what those 2 lots were all about. But the other 5 lots, one of them was to deliver surgical or a surgery, a theater room. Another one was to deliver ICU equipment. And you'll find that some of those items that we think ought to have been bought rather than be leased came under that package. But even if they came under that package, and considering that you're supplying to 47 times 2, you're supplying to 94 hospitals across this country. In fact, it was about 98 hospitals, 47 counties, 2 hospitals per county, and then the national referral hospitals, plus 21 additional hospitals. The economies of scale should ensure that whatever you are getting per item is much lower than what you'd get in the open market. So this is just another example of a system that people have found a way of taking away public money. But I also don't want to be misinterpreted, because there is an inquiry that is actively going on. At this point, I would not want to come up with conclusions before this committee reports back to the House, but I'm basing my comments today on the matters that have come before my committee, which have been adopted by the House, and the matters that have already been put in the public domain.
And for now, what for sure we know is that the contract to the ICT aspect, HCIT, I believe, has been suspended or has been cancelled. The contractor that was working with the ministry on this, 7 Seas, you mentioned criminality. Should it just end at that this has been cancelled, it was a bad deal? The Attorney General said we were not involved in all of this, which led to the cancellation of the same. So what more do we need to see as far as holding to account? Because clearly, some would argue, it would appear that some individuals in the Ministry of Health colluded with some business people to fleece Kenyans.
Yeah, the ICT component, if it is not delivered, it also affects the original intention of this project, because that ICT component was meant to link all these 94 hospitals, such that if you're going to do a CT scan in Homa Bay, for example, and you don't have radiologists and experts, then those readings can be relayed to a radiologist sitting in Makueni, and then interpretation can be done, and the patient in Homa Bay can get results. It was to promote telemedicine. It was to bring in an element of expert systems within the health sector. And it was a very noble and innovative thinking. What we find a little bit uncomfortable is a cost involved. And now, beyond the cost, the fact that the company that won the tender to supply this particular component has gone public, saying that he's been shortchanged. Perhaps Senate might not be the venue to deal with tendering issues and procurement issues. And that's why we set up the Independent Procurement Oversight Authority to deal with those issues. But at the end of the day, if you're going to spend all these billions of shillings without doing the linkages and the connections between the hospitals, then you're going to have silos. You're going to have 94 silos, which then is not going to deliver the objectives of this project. And I think the Ministry of Health, beside coming before Senate and arguing with the contractor over terms and over certain components of the contract, they should tell Kenyans, if you're not going to go with 7 Cs, or if you're not going to go with this particular contractor, what is your plan to make sure that at the end of the day, the 94 centers and hospitals are connected, and that Kenyans can take advantage of the limited pool of experts that we have in this country? Because that was the ultimate intention, that you can sit in Turkana without having an expert or a specialist in Turkana, but you can connect with that specialist sitting in Nairobi or sitting in Mombasa or sitting somewhere else in the country. So we must be told how and when this will be delivered, and at a cost that constitutes value for money for the Kenyan public.
And being chair of the Public Accounts Committee, and President Kenyatta, one of the big four agenda, healthcare, universal healthcare. Some would argue this is a big stain in terms of you're seeking to provide universal healthcare, but this is a huge scandal on his front door. It is a project that was launched in State House by himself, so that now you have a minister being moved to a different ministry. But in your view, should in the backstop there, that we should not just rotate people around, there should be a sense of strong accountability, so that others who come after know that if you mess up, or if there are issues that are not making sense, taxpayers' money is being lost, and healthcare, this life and death, being put at risk, that there will be serious consequences.
In the hearings, it has emerged that there were certain conversations that took place in State House or in the presence of State House officials. And I think that the President also owes the nation an explanation to disconnect himself from those contracts or from those signatures or from those activities that are said to have happened in the corridors of State House. But the President's agenda on healthcare, which is an extremely noble agenda, anybody who wants to run this country must make healthcare top of the agenda. Definitely, it is going to suffer if the managed equipment scheme is not going to deliver on its objectives. We already have challenges in other sectors, particularly when it comes to human resources for healthcare provision in this country. And that is why we are proposing that we have a health service commission, so that we have mobility and we create a national pool of doctors rather than creating regional pools. We have serious challenges when it comes to health infrastructure, to delivery of drugs. We have serious challenges when it comes to preventive rather than curative medicine. So the challenges are immense. We have serious challenges with the National Hospital Insurance Fund that we believe ought to be financed from taxes rather than going around collecting money from the poor of the poorest, and then that money is spent on expensive ICT systems that benefit only a few people. So the President must take a holistic view of the health sector, but I'm afraid with all these revelations coming out of the mess of the managed equipment scheme, I don't believe we'll be able to achieve our targets on healthcare under the Big Four.
Thank you very much. Senator Moses Kajwang with us here on the big story, the mess of the mess. How will it all end? We will wait to see. Back to you, Jesse.
Thanks, Sophia Wanuna. Definitely an interesting conversation right there. And I mean, he's just put it correctly. Project described as opaque and a classical mess. I mean, the economies of scale just don't seem to add up. And that's what we'll be discussing about tonight. We'll try and delve deeper. Already joining me in studio, in our city center studio rather, is Dr. Simon Kigondu, who is a member of the KMPDU and also sits at the National Executive Council. And we'll get to deliberate with him just some few notable issues that have arisen, not just around the cost, also around the tender, and as well as what exactly was entailed in, procuring this medical equipment. Have they really served the purpose? 63 billion is quite a sum. So let's just look at this messy MES scandal, as Sophia Nuna has just put it. In terms of the timelines, there you have it. When it was procured in 2015 by the Ministry of Health, meant to serve a 7-year contract. Right now, it's in its 5th year. 98 hospitals were earmarked as beneficiaries, and a total tender sum has risen to 63 billion Kenya shillings, up from 38 billion, which is set to be shouldered by the counties. So some of the issues that have arisen in that particular scandal, the MES project right there, leased equipment, we've just seen all that. But let's listen to what some of the leaders, especially governors, had to say about the MES scandal and its impact so far.
Inventory of what was delivered to you,
yes.
In what condition, in what quantity.
It was on sealed boxes.
I had to come to the Ministry of Health to see what was given to us in Gishu. And I would like to say that even like theatre equipment were taken to MTRH, which was supposed to be in Uasin Gishu, and they said that it was supposed to be in Uasin Gishu.
As the chair of the Council of Governors, yes. You agree with me that this is a serious scandal?
I agree. We never saw any contract between the Ministry of Health and the contractor.
If we could have gotten this money directly, we could have bought more of these equipments.
To me, it is a conspiracy because you've not spoken about it. You've not investigated. But here you are telling us that you know nothing about it. And you go ahead to sign an MOU. All governors signing MOUs because your chief has spoken. Because there is pressure from who? Probably we need to be told who is this authority that we need to name for wastage of public funds.
Well, Wycliffe Oparanya being put on the spot there. Well, he said it. Some of the contracts were never seen by the Council of Governors or the governors who actually signed that memorandum of understanding, poking more holes into this MES scandal. Let's just bring in Dr. Simon Kegondu, who, as I mentioned earlier on, sits on the National Executive Council and KMPDU. Dr. good evening, and thank you so much for making time. Let's start on this note. A report that was tabled in front of the Senate Ad Hoc Committee looking into this MES project actually says the digital X-ray machines, which were installed in roughly 15 counties, lack adequate electricity, so they can't be used. And that just doesn't apply to those machines, as well as theatre and radiology equipment. Yet, looking at the aim of this project, it was meant to provide uninterrupted health services despite the locality of a specific patient. Is this MES project really serving its purpose, according to you? And if not, why? All right, we don't seem to be in connection with Dr. Simon Kigondu. We'll definitely revisit later on once we establish a proper connection. But right now, let me just bring in Machakos Governor Alfred Mutua, who is set to join us by way of phone. And I'd like to front the similar question to him. I mean, you are serving your second term as governor. You were there in 2015 when the initial procurement was done by the Ministry of Health. What's the status in your county, Governor Mutua, so far? Are the machines being used? And if yes, are they truly serving the purpose that was meant to be achieved in this MES project?
Yes, thank you very much. That I'd like to state clearly that I understood what President Uhuru Kenyatta wanted to achieve. What he wanted to achieve was a form of equity, because, you know, healthcare in our country is so disparate that it depends on where you are, whether you can, when an accident occurs or you get sick, your survival depends on where you are. And he wanted to kind of normalize it so that it does not matter in your Wajir or in Machakos or in Mombasa, at least you can get the basics. And you look at things like kidney diseases, you know, when people need to do dialysis, people are lining up in Nairobi. It said, let's diversify so that you don't have to go from Kakamega to Nairobi. EPC. For me, in Machakos, the system works. I know we've had questions, we've had queries about how the procurement was done. However, for me, I can attest that Machakos hospitals are that much better because of the machines. This may not be the case with other governors, but for me in Machakos, we have a functioning We have functioning dialysis. We have an ICU. We've got new theaters that we've been able to use effectively. We have X-ray machines that we're able to use effectively in Machakos, in Kangundo. And so, in a nutshell, in Machakos, they have saved hundreds, if not thousands, of lives since they were installed.
Appreciate the fact that everything seems to be working so well. But looking at what was arising during the Senate ad hoc committee, I mean, there are some counties that highlighted it just wasn't medical equipment, you know, proper medical equipment that was supplied. There were instances of consumables and disposable kits being delivered to the counties. Was this the case as well in your county, Machakos?
No, it wasn't. I think maybe I benefited because mine was the first one, and it was actually launched by President Uhuru Kenyatta, and I actually set the standard. When they came, I established the standards in terms of how the X-ray rooms will be built, how the ICUs will look like. So I kind of established the standard. So Machakos, we benefited. I remember we had an MRI machine that was to go to, I believe, Coast General in Mombasa, and they did not want anything to do with it. So it was brought in Machakos. Now we have a functioning MRI machine that is not necessarily in small places like Machakos. You know, then Machakos is now a very big place. And so we benefited. So Machakos actually got all the machines, including, and we've continued getting more machines and we continue getting more equipment that we've bought and others that have come from the national government. And including now we are basically making our own oxygen, and we're operating at a very different level. So I think our experience in Machakos may be a bit different than others, but for me, I can attest to the fact that these machines have saved lives. And it's very important to point out that there is no initiative that does not have teething problems or does not have challenges. And also, it also depends on the preparedness of the institution that is receiving them. Machakos, we were at a point, because of my Mendeleo chapter principle and the way I'd organized my government, to be able to receive them and actually be able to service them. We've had issues at times with breakages of the X-ray machines and others, of the scans and others, but we deal with them when they happen. And we intervene and we do what we need to do.
Allow me to interject Last question, very quick. Were you consulted in the procurement process of this equipment? Because we've seen governors actually highlighting that the contract was no-see to most of them. Were you consulted?
All them, and we were given a choice.
Mutua, he was just describing to us the situation in the county. Machakos definitely seems to have benefited, especially from this particular machines. But as he mentioned, it doesn't seem to be the case across the 47 counties who are set to pay roughly 200 million per year in order to, meet the cost of this particular MES project. Well, good news right there, it seems, but we'll cross over and also hear from other stakeholders in various counties, including Dr. Simon Kegondu, who is still with us, joining us from our city center studios. Let's take a short break right now. We'll be back with the messy MES scandal.